He expected a bitter showdown, but she arrived holding 2 baby boys who carried his eyes and his forgotten promises. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. Lauren Mitchell balanced 3 plates along her forearm as she navigated the crowded tables of Cafe Manhattanite. The Friday lunch rush was at its peak, businessmen in tailored suits jostling for attention alongside NYU students clutching laptops. Despite the chaos, Lauren moved with practiced grace, her honey-brown ponytail swinging with each precise step. "Market's down again," remarked Mr. Kessler, a regular who worked at a nearby investment firm, as Lauren set down his turkey club sandwich. "4th consecutive day," she replied, arranging his napkin. "The Fed's interest rate policy is spooking investors, but I think it's an overcorrection." Mr. Kessler's eyebrows rose in surprise, then settled into an impressed smile. "Business major?" "Administration at NYU, part-time." Lauren flashed a quick smile before pivoting toward her next table. By 6 o'clock, Lauren's feet throbbed as she counted her tips. $63. Not terrible, not great. It would cover her share of utilities at least. She tucked the money into her worn leather wallet and slipped out into the Manhattan evening, the autumn air carrying the first hint of coming winter. The F train to Brooklyn was packed with commuters. Lauren wedged herself against a pole, pulling out her dog-eared microeconomics textbook. Her eyes burned with fatigue, but she had a paper due Monday. Sleep would have to wait. An hour later, Lauren unlocked the door to her shared apartment, wincing at the blast of music that greeted her. Her roommates, Jess and Alyssa, were pre-gaming for a night out, the coffee table littered with makeup and half-empty vodka bottles. "Lauren, join us!" Jess shouted over the music, waving a mascara wand like a conductor's baton. "Can't. Paper due." Lauren gestured to her backpack, already heading toward her room, really a converted dining area separated by a curtain. At her small desk, Lauren switched on the single lamp and spread out her books. The steady thump of bass from the living room made concentration nearly impossible, but she'd become adept at tuning it out. Her scholarship covered 70% of tuition, but rent, food, and the remainder of her school fees demanded every spare hour be filled with work. At 24, Lauren's life was a careful calibration of necessities, with sleep consistently at the bottom of the priority list. The next day, Lauren arrived at the cafe 10 minutes early for her shift, using the time to review notes for her afternoon class. Saturday brought the weekend crowd, louder, needier, and typically worse tippers than the weekday regulars. She was refilling water glasses at table 7 when the bell above the door chimed. Lauren glanced up automatically, her practiced smile freezing slightly as the new arrival stepped inside. Even in the casual setting of the cafe, the man exuded privilege, from his camel hair coat to his artfully tousled dark hair. He surveyed the room with the calm assurance of someone accustomed to the best table in any establishment. When he chose a small table by the window and opened the Financial Times, Lauren found herself assigned to his section. She approached with professional detachment. "Good morning. Today's specials are the goat cheese omelet and blueberry ricotta pancakes. Can I start you with some coffee?" He looked up, and Lauren was struck by unusual blue-gray eyes that seemed to evaluate rather than simply see. "Americano, please. Double shot." His voice matched his appearance, cultured, confident, slightly detached. Lauren nodded and turned, but his voice stopped her. "Excuse me, your opinion on something?" She turned back, surprised. "Sir?" He gestured to his newspaper. "Reynolds Media Group is acquiring Sentinel Publications. Smart move or desperate consolidation?" The question was clearly a test, perhaps even a subtle mockery. Lauren straightened slightly. "Desperate? Definitely. Print media needs innovation, not consolidation. Reynolds is just buying time, not solving their digital transition problem." Something flickered in those remarkable eyes. Surprise, followed by interest. "Most people would just agree with me." He folded the newspaper. "I'm Trevor Trevor Reynolds. Lauren's eyes widened slightly. Reynolds, as in Reynolds Holdings, the media conglomerate worth billions. She'd just told the heir to the Reynolds fortune that his family company was making a desperate move. Lauren Mitchell. She recovered quickly. And I still think it's a bad acquisition. Trevor Reynolds laughed, the sound warm and unexpected. Bring me that Americano, Lauren Mitchell, and then tell me why. That conversation extended through his leisurely breakfast and into Lauren's break. Trevor listened with genuine interest as she outlined her thoughts on digital media transformation, occasionally challenging her points with incisive questions that revealed both his Harvard MBA and sharp business acumen. "You're wasted carrying coffee," he said finally, signing his check with a flourish. "Have dinner with me tonight." Lauren blinked, surprised by the abrupt invitation. "I have a study group. Tomorrow then. I work Sunday brunch. After your shift." He slid a business card across the table. "Call me when you're done." Against her better judgment, Lauren did call. The following evening found her seated across from Trevor Reynolds at Mirabelle, a restaurant so exclusive Lauren hadn't even known it existed. The maitre d' had greeted Trevor by name, escorting them to a corner table with a spectacular view of the city lights. Lauren tugged self-consciously at her simple black dress, the nicest thing she owned, purchased on sale 3 years ago for job interviews. "You look beautiful," Trevor said, noticing her discomfort. "Everyone else here is trying too hard." Throughout dinner, Trevor asked about her life, her Irish immigrant parents who had returned to Dublin after her father's heart attack, her scholarship to NYU, her ambitions. He listened with an intensity Lauren found both flattering and disarming. "You know what's refreshing about you, Lauren?" Trevor said as they shared a decadent chocolate dessert. "You have something none of these socialites have: authenticity. It's like a breath of fresh air." The next 6 months passed in a whirlwind that Lauren could scarcely believe was her life. Trevor swept her into a world of penthouse apartments, celebrity-filled charity galas, and weekend escapes to his family's Southampton estate. He seemed genuinely fascinated by her perspective, her ambition, her unassuming intelligence. Yet there were discordant notes in their fairy tale. Trevor never introduced her to his family, always finding excuses when she asked. "They're complicated, Lauren," he'd say, kissing her forehead. "My father is old school about everything. Let's wait for the right moment." Lauren tried to ignore the whispers at social events, the appraising glances from women in designer dresses when Trevor introduced her as "my Lauren." She focused instead on how he made her laugh, how he challenged her intellectually, how he made her feel special. Until the afternoon, everything changed. Lauren paced nervously in Trevor's Central Park West penthouse, waiting for him to return from a board meeting. She'd used the key he'd given her 2 months ago, letting herself in to prepare for a conversation that would change both their lives. In her purse were 2 positive pregnancy tests, taken that morning in the bathroom of her Brooklyn apartment. After the initial shock, a cautious joy had blossomed. They hadn't planned this, but after 6 months together, Lauren believed they had something real. Trevor often spoke about their future, about showing her Paris in the spring, about her potential role in his business ventures once she graduated. When the elevator doors opened, Lauren turned expectantly, smile ready. But she knew immediately something was wrong. Trevor's face was set in unfamiliar lines, his posture rigid as he strode into the living room. "We need to talk," he said, not kissing her hello. "Coincidence," Lauren replied, her hands trembling slightly. "I need to talk to you too." Trevor poured himself a generous whiskey, not offering her one. "I'm taking over as international president of Reynolds, moving to London for 2 years." "Oh," Lauren felt slightly unsteady. "When?" "Next month. The announcement goes out tomorrow." Lauren took a deep breath. "Trevor, I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was deafening. Trevor's glass paused halfway to his lips, his blue-gray eyes suddenly cold as they fixed on her face. Then came the laugh, not warm as it had been that first day in the cafe, but cold, calculated, cruel. "You're joking, right? Is this some kind of scheme? What? No, we were always careful, but… Trevor set his glass down hard, amber liquid sloshing over the rim. Lauren, be realistic. Do you really think I'm going to ruin my future over a mistake with a waitress from Brooklyn? The words hit Lauren like a physical blow. Mistake? Is that what I am to you? Let's be pragmatic about this, he said, walking to his office. He returned with a checkbook. This should solve the problem. He filled out a check for $5,000 and tossed it onto the coffee table between them. Problem? Lauren whispered, her voice breaking. I'm talking about a baby, our baby. Be reasonable, Lauren. You don't belong in my world. You never did. It was fun while it lasted, but this… He gestured dismissively toward her stomach. This isn't part of my plans. It never was. Tears streamed down Lauren's face as Trevor continued, his voice growing harder with each word. You're smart enough to understand. You were always temporary. My family has expectations. Next week I'm announcing my engagement to Vanessa Huntington. It's been planned for months. Lauren felt the floor disappear beneath her feet. You were with her while we were together? This is how the real world works, Lauren. Alliances, mergers, legacies. You're just a burden I've carried for too long. Go back to your world and don't contact me again. In the elevator descending from the 48th floor, Lauren's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. When she reached the street, a snowstorm was battering Manhattan, the icy flakes stinging her tear-streaked face. With the crumpled check in her pocket, she wandered aimlessly toward the subway, his words echoing, "You'll never be enough for someone like me." While her tears froze on her face that winter night, Lauren couldn't possibly imagine that 15 years later, the man who had discarded her would be begging for her attention as she commanded a billion-dollar empire built with her own hands. The crumpled check burned in Lauren's pocket as she stumbled through the snow-covered streets of Manhattan. $5,000. That was the price Trevor Reynolds had placed on their unborn child. On her. The biting January wind cut through her thin coat, but she barely felt it against the numbing shock of his words. You don't belong in my world. You never did. 3 blocks from Trevor's building, nausea hit her with such force that Lauren doubled over, retching into a snow-covered trash can. Morning sickness, she realized with bitter irony, at 6 in the evening. A passing businessman skirted around her with a disgusted glance. Lauren wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, tears freezing on her cheeks. The subway ride back to Brooklyn passed in a blur. Lauren sat motionless, staring at her reflection in the dark window, a pale ghost superimposed over the flashing lights of the tunnel. 6 months ago, she'd been a waitress with dreams. Then Trevor had pulled her into his world like a shooting star, only to extinguish her just as quickly. Are you okay, miss? An elderly woman touched her arm gently. Lauren blinked, realizing her stop had come and gone. I'm fine, she whispered, the lie bitter on her tongue. 2 weeks later, Lauren stood before Monica, the cafe manager, trying to keep her voice steady despite another wave of nausea threatening to overtake her. This is the 3rd shift you've missed this month, Lauren. Monica's voice was sympathetic but firm. I've covered for you because you've been reliable for years, but I need staff I can count on. I know, I'm sorry. I've been sick, but I'm better now. Lauren straightened her apron, ignoring the queasiness. It won't happen again. But it did happen again. 3 days later, Lauren barely made it to the employee bathroom before violently emptying her stomach. When she emerged, pale and shaking, Monica was waiting. Go home, Lauren. She handed her a small envelope. I'm sorry, but this isn't working anymore. The envelope contained her final paycheck, $217. Not even enough for half her share of next month's rent. The eviction notice came 2 weeks later, taped to their apartment door. Lauren's roommates confronted her in the kitchen, their faces a mixture of sympathy and frustration. We covered you last month, Lauren, but we can't do it again, said Jess, avoiding eye contact. Alyssa's cousin needs a place and she can actually pay rent. I understand, Lauren replied, her voice hollow. I'll be out by Friday. That night, Lauren sat cross-legged on her narrow bed, calculator in hand, trying to make impossible numbers work. Her savings, once earmarked for next semester's tuition, had dwindled to less than $600. Her final paycheck was gone, spent on prenatal vitamins the doctor had insisted were essential and the emergency room visit when she'd fainted on campus. The campus medical center had confirmed what the drugstore tests had already told her. Approximately 8 weeks along, the doctor had said, her expression carefully neutral when Lauren explained there would be no father in the picture. With nowhere else to turn, Lauren called her cousin Diane in Queens. They'd never been particularly close, but Diane was the only family Lauren had in New York since her parents had returned to Ireland. "Of course you can stay with us," Diane said, though Lauren could hear the hesitation in her voice. "Just until you get back on your feet." Friday morning, Lauren stood on the sidewalk outside her former apartment building, watching her ex-roommates avoid her gaze as they helped load her few possessions into a borrowed car. A small suitcase of clothes, a box of textbooks, her laptop, and a framed photo of her parents on their last visit to New York. 4 years in the city, reduced to items that fit in a car trunk. Diane's apartment in Astoria was a cramped 2-bedroom where Lauren would be sleeping on a pull-out sofa in the living room. Diane's husband Mike worked nights as a security guard, and their 6-year-old son Kyle regarded Lauren with unabashed curiosity. "Are you going to live with us forever?" he asked as Lauren arranged her meager belongings beside the sofa. "No, sweetheart," she answered, forcing a smile. "Just for a little while." That night, Lauren lay awake on the uncomfortable sofa bed, one hand resting on her still flat stomach. "I'm going to fix this," she whispered to her unborn child. Somehow. The next morning, Lauren sat in the crowded waiting room of a public health clinic in Queens, surrounded by other women in similar circumstances. Some had partners beside them, others small children pulling at their clothes. Lauren sat alone, clutching her paperwork. "Mitchell? Lauren?" called a nurse, leading her to a small examination room. The ultrasound technician was brisk but kind, spreading cold gel on Lauren's abdomen. "Let's see what we have here." Lauren stared at the grainy black and white screen, trying to make sense of the shapes. The technician suddenly paused, adjusting the wand slightly, then smiled. "Well, Ms. Mitchell, I see 2 heartbeats. You're having twins." The world seemed to stop. "Twins?" Lauren repeated, her voice barely audible. "Yes, look here." The technician pointed to 2 distinct flickering pulses. 2 healthy heartbeats. You're about 14 weeks along. Lauren's eyes filled with tears, of fear, of wonder, of overwhelming responsibility. One baby had seemed impossible enough. Now there were 2. In the following days, Lauren moved with the determination of someone whose options had narrowed to a single path forward. She scoured job listings, applied for every remote position she could find, and stretched her dwindling savings with military precision. By the end of February, Lauren had cobbled together 3 jobs: morning receptionist at a veterinary clinic in Astoria, afternoon customer service representative at a call center she could reach by bus, and freelance data entry she could do from Diane's apartment at night. Between the 3, she earned just enough to contribute to Diane's household expenses and save a small amount for her future. Sleep became a luxury she could no longer afford. Lauren worked from 6 in the morning until midnight, grabbing naps when she could, eating the minimum necessary to keep her growing babies healthy. Her pregnancy progressed, her body changing while her circumstances remained precarious. "You can't keep this pace up," Diane warned one evening, finding Lauren asleep over her laptop, dark circles prominent under her eyes. "It's not good for the babies." "I don't have a choice," Lauren replied, straightening and wincing at the pain in her lower back. "I need to save enough for a place before they arrive." March brought another blow. Lauren received an email from NYU's financial aid office. Her scholarship would be forfeited if she didn't return for the upcoming semester. With no way to afford tuition, Lauren made the painful decision to withdraw from the program she'd worked so hard to enter. The administrative officer was sympathetic as Lauren signed the withdrawal forms. "You can always come back, you know. Credits are good for 5 years." Lauren nodded, though she couldn't imagine a scenario where returning would be possible with infant twins and no support. That evening, she transferred her credits to an online business program, less prestigious than NYU, but something she could potentially manage alongside motherhood and work. She wouldn't give up on her education entirely, even if the path had changed. In her rare moments of rest, Lauren allowed herself to feel the full weight of her situation. The betrayal by Trevor still burned, his cruel dismissal replaying in her darkest moments. "You were always temporary." The words echoed in her mind as she lay on the sofa bed, her growing belly making sleep increasingly uncomfortable. One night in early April, Lauren was folding laundry in Diane's living room when a familiar voice from the television caught her attention. There on the screen was Trevor, standing beside a willowy blonde woman at what appeared to be a glamorous party. "Reynolds Holdings International celebrates the opening of its new London headquarters," announced the reporter. Trevor Reynolds, newly appointed international president, was joined by his fiancée, Vanessa Huntington, daughter of banking magnate William Huntington. The camera zoomed in on the couple, champagne glasses raised in a toast. "To new beginnings and a bright future for the Reynolds empire," Trevor said, his smile confident as cameras flashed. Lauren stood frozen, a small onesie she'd purchased from a thrift store clutched in her hands. Trevor looked exactly as he had 2 months ago, polished, privileged, untouched by the devastation he'd left in his wake. Meanwhile, she was working 3 jobs, sleeping on a sofa and counting pennies for prenatal vitamins. "Is that him?" Diane asked quietly, having entered the room unnoticed. Lauren nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "What a bastard," Diane muttered, reaching for the remote to change the channel. "No, wait." Lauren stopped her. She forced herself to watch as Trevor and Vanessa posed for photographers, his arm possessively around her waist, the enormous diamond on her finger catching the light. In that moment, something crystallized in Lauren. She placed both hands on her rounded belly, feeling a flutter of movement beneath her palms. "They will only ever know strength in me, not weakness," she whispered to her unborn children. "I'm going to build a world where you'll never need a man like him. And one day, he'll see exactly what he threw away." The next morning, Lauren sat at Diane's kitchen table before dawn, laptop open as she registered for online courses that would transfer her NYU credits. Working with fierce concentration, she mapped out a path to complete her degree while working and raising her children. As she counted coins for prenatal vitamins, Lauren couldn't imagine that in 15 years, she would be the one deciding the financial fate of the company Trevor had valued above their child. July arrived with oppressive heat that settled over Queens like a heavy blanket. Lauren, now 8 months pregnant, moved slowly through her daily routine, her body a testament to both creation and endurance. The twins had grown vigorously, turning her once flat stomach into a perfect dome that strained against even her largest maternity shirts, all second-hand finds from neighborhood thrift stores. "You look ready to pop," remarked her co-worker at the veterinary clinic as Lauren lowered herself carefully into the reception chair. "Shouldn't you be on leave already?" "2 more weeks," Lauren replied, rubbing her lower back where pain had become a constant companion. "I need every dollar I can save." The truth was more desperate than she let on. Lauren had calculated and recalculated her finances countless times. Even working until her due date, she would barely have enough for the first month's rent on the tiny basement apartment she'd secured in a far corner of Queens, a damp, windowless space that rented for less than market rate precisely because it barely met housing codes. That evening, as she made the slow journey back to Diane's apartment, Lauren felt the first twinge, different from the Braxton Hicks contractions she'd been experiencing for weeks. She paused on the sidewalk, one hand braced against a mailbox, waiting for it to pass. Just a little longer. she whispered to her unborn sons. "We're not quite ready for you yet." But the twins had their own schedule. By midnight, Lauren was being wheeled into the delivery room at Queen's General Hospital, her contractions coming 5 minutes apart. The midwife checked her chart with a frown. "No birth partner listed?" Lauren shook her head, gripping the bed rail as another contraction seized her. "It's just me." The next 14 hours blurred into a haze of pain, clinical lights, and gentle but firm instructions. When transition came, Lauren reached blindly for support, finding only the hand of a kind-faced nurse who stayed past her shift. "You're not alone," the nurse assured her, allowing Lauren to crush her fingers as the first twin began his journey into the world. At 3:17 in the afternoon, Ethan Mitchell announced his arrival with a robust cry. 7 minutes later, his brother Noah followed, slightly smaller, but equally vocal. "2 healthy boys," the doctor announced, placing the swaddled infants in Lauren's trembling arms. Looking down at their tiny, perfect faces, red and wrinkled from their ordeal, Lauren felt an overwhelming surge of love that eclipsed every ounce of pain and uncertainty. They were hers. She had made them, and despite everything, they had arrived safely. "Hello, my loves," she whispered, tracing a finger along each downy cheek. "I've been waiting for you." The hospital allowed Lauren and the twins to stay an extra day due to her C-section and their slightly early arrival. It was a brief respite before the reality of single motherhood crashed down. On the 3rd day, Lauren was discharged with 2 newborns, a stack of care instructions, and the terrifying knowledge that she was now solely responsible for these precious lives. Diane and Mike had converted a corner of their living room with a second-hand bassinet, just large enough for the twins to share for their first weeks. Lauren was grateful, but acutely aware that their patience had limits. The apartment, already cramped before, now felt impossibly small with the addition of 2 infants and all their necessities. The first night home was a brutal introduction to her new reality. The twins seemed to coordinate their crying, ensuring that the moment one settled, the other began to wail. Lauren paced the small living room until dawn, alternating between nursing, changing, and soothing, her C-section incision throbbing with each movement. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted to Diane the next morning, tears streaming down her face as both babies cried simultaneously. She hadn't slept more than 20 consecutive minutes in 36 hours. Diane, herself exhausted from the night's disruption, took Noah from Lauren's arms. "Nobody does at first, but you'll figure it out because you have to." The next weeks passed in a fog of sleep deprivation and physical recovery. Lauren's body, still healing from surgery, rebelled against the demands of newborn twins. Breastfeeding, which she had imagined as a natural, beautiful connection, became a painful struggle as she tried to produce enough milk for 2 hungry boys. "It's normal to supplement with formula," the lactation consultant at the clinic assured her during a follow-up visit, "especially with twins." But formula was expensive, another strain on her precarious budget. Lauren pushed through cracked nipples and midnight exhaustion, determined to provide what her body could give freely. Between feedings, diaper changes, and brief moments of sleep, Lauren tried to maintain her online coursework. Her laptop balanced precariously on the arm of the sofa as she typed one-handed, often with a baby asleep on her chest. Assignments that once would have taken hours now stretched across days as she pieced together paragraphs between caretaking moments. 1 month after the twins' birth, Diane approached Lauren as she folded the day's laundry, tiny onesies and burp cloths that seemed to multiply exponentially. "Mike and I have been talking," she began carefully. "We love having you and the boys here, but our lease only allows for 4 residents. The landlord noticed the babies during his inspection yesterday." Lauren's hands stilled on a half-folded sleeper. "How long do we have?" "He's giving us until the end of next month," Diane replied, her expression apologetic. "I'm sorry, Lauren." That night, after the twins had finally settled into a rare, synchronized sleep, Lauren sat beside their bassinet, watching the gentle rise and fall of their tiny chests, In the soft glow of the nightlight, she studied their features with wonder and trepidation. It was then she noticed what she had been too exhausted to truly see before. Ethan, the firstborn, had a distinctive set to his eyes, almond-shaped with a slight upward tilt at the corners. And when Noah briefly opened his eyes between sleep cycles, Lauren caught her breath. Those weren't her hazel eyes looking back at her. They were blue-gray, the exact shade that had first captivated her across a cafe table over a year ago. Trevor's eyes. The unmistakable Reynolds family trait that had graced magazine covers and society pages for generations now rested in the innocent faces of her sons. Lauren touched each boy's cheek gently. "You'll never need him," she whispered, her resolve hardening. "I promise you that." The next morning, Lauren applied for 3 more remote positions, determined to secure enough income to afford the basement apartment. Her email to the online university explained her situation and requested flexibility with assignment deadlines. To her surprise, her academic advisor responded with unexpected compassion, connecting her with a special program for student parents that offered extended time frames for course completion. By mid-August, Lauren had secured a position as a remote data analyst for a small market research company. The pay was modest, but crucially, she could work during the twins' nap times and after they went down for the night. Combined with her savings and the remains of the payment from the veterinary clinic, it would be just enough for the first month's rent and security deposit on the basement apartment. The day they moved in was bittersweet. The space was dark and smelled faintly of mildew, with pipes running across the low ceiling and a single egress window set high in one wall. But it was theirs. A first home for the little family Lauren was determined to raise with dignity despite the circumstances. She arranged the twins' bassinet in the corner furthest from the dampness, positioning her own mattress on the floor beside it. A folding table became her desk, workstation, and dining area. The mini refrigerator hummed loudly in the silence, but Lauren barely noticed as she settled the boys for their evening feeding. "It's not much," she told them, her voice the only music in the Spartan space. "But it's just temporary. We're going somewhere better, I promise." That promise became her mantra through the grueling months that followed. While the twins slept, Lauren devoured articles and research papers on electronic waste management, a growing field she'd become interested in during an environmental economics course. The statistics were staggering. Millions of tons of discarded electronics containing valuable, recoverable materials simply dumped in landfills or shipped to developing countries. Where others saw trash, Lauren began to see opportunity. Late at night, after feeding the twins, she made notes and sketched rudimentary flow charts for more efficient recycling processes. Her background in business administration merged with newly acquired technical knowledge as she identified gaps in the existing system. The twins grew rapidly, their personalities emerging through the haze of infancy. Ethan, slightly larger and more vocal, demanded attention with lusty cries. Noah, quieter and more observant, watched the world with those unsettling blue-gray eyes that reminded Lauren daily of their origin. By December, with the twins now 5 months old, Lauren had transferred her remaining NYU credits to an online business program she could complete in her own time. Her job as a data analyst had expanded to include market research specializing in technology consumption patterns, knowledge that fed directly into her growing interest in electronic waste. On Christmas Eve, sitting on her mattress with the twins asleep beside her, Lauren opened her laptop to find an email from her boss. "Your analysis of the tech replacement cycle has caught the attention of our biggest client," he wrote. "They want more data on post-consumer electronics. Could this become your specialty focus?" Lauren glanced at her sleeping sons, then at the diagrams and articles about electronic recycling scattered across her makeshift desk. A path was forming, unclear still, but discernible. That night, as a rare winter storm rattled the single window of their basement home, Lauren made detailed notes about component recovery from circuit boards while the twins slept peacefully nearby. It wasn't the Christmas she had imagined a year ago when she had still been in Trevor's glittering world, but it held something his world never had: authenticity and purpose. Nourished by determination rather than resources, Lauren's mind raced with possibilities. She was building something, not just a future for her sons, but perhaps a solution to a growing environmental problem. The ideas forming in her notebook that night, sketched between feeding schedules and diaper changes, would one day revolutionize an industry. That night, surrounded by used diapers and notes about electronic circuits, Lauren couldn't possibly predict that her nascent obsession would transform into technology that would revolutionize an entire industry and put her on the cover of Fortune magazine by age 35. The whir of a laptop fan punctuated the quiet of Lauren's apartment as the twins celebrated their third birthday with paper hats and a small homemade cake. The basement dwelling was long behind them now. Her current apartment, though still modest, boasted actual windows and enough space for the twins to have their own small bedroom. Lauren smiled as Ethan smeared frosting across his face while Noah methodically dissected his cake slice, examining each layer before eating. "Mommy, did you make a wish too?" Ethan asked, blue-gray eyes wide beneath a shock of dark hair. "I already got my wishes," Lauren replied, nodding toward the computer screen where her final grades for her bachelor's degree glowed proudly. After 3 years of late nights, sacrificed sleep, and assignments completed during precious moments of quiet, she had finished her degree with honors. The online ceremony had been underwhelming, just a scrolling list of names on a live stream, but the sense of accomplishment was profound. That evening, after tucking the boys into bed with extra birthday cuddles, Lauren returned to her small desk in the corner of the living room. Her diploma would arrive by mail in a few weeks, but tonight she had something more important to focus on. The twins' birthday celebration had depleted her modest decorating budget, but it was worth every penny to see their delighted faces. Now, with the apartment quiet, she returned to her growing obsession. 3 browser windows displayed research papers on electronic waste recovery. A 4th showed job listings for positions in sustainability and recycling technology. Lauren's work as a data analyst had evolved into a specialization in technology consumption patterns, giving her unique insights into the life cycles of electronic devices. What had begun as casual interest during her coursework had developed into expertise that her company now relied upon. The following morning, Lauren walked the twins to preschool, their small hands warm in hers. The September air carried the first hint of autumn, and fallen leaves crunched beneath their feet. "Mom, look!" Noah stopped suddenly, pointing at a pile of discarded electronics stacked beside a dumpster. An office building was clearly upgrading its equipment. Monitors, CPUs, and tangled masses of cables formed a small mountain of technological waste. Lauren paused, assessing the pile with a professional eye. "That's a lot of potential going to waste," she murmured. "Potential what?" Ethan asked, already attempting to climb the pile before Lauren gently pulled him back. "Potential resources," she explained, crouching to their level. "Inside those computers are special materials that could be reused instead of thrown away." Noah, always the more analytical of the twins, examined the pile with newfound interest. "Like treasure hunting?" "Exactly like treasure hunting." Lauren smiled, making a mental note of the building's address. "But we need to get you to school now. Adventure later." That evening, after the boys were asleep, Lauren returned to the dumpster. Wearing work gloves and carrying a backpack, she selected 2 discarded computers and a handful of circuit boards. The security guard who emerged from the building regarded her suspiciously until she explained her research interests. To her surprise, he helped her carry several more components to her car. "Better you than the landfill," he shrugged. Lauren's kitchen table transformed into an improvisational laboratory over the following weeks. Between preparing meals and helping the boys with early reading skills, she disassembled the salvaged electronics, separating components and researching their potential value. The twins watched with fascination as she identified gold-plated connectors, copper wiring, and rare earth elements embedded in seemingly worthless parts. "Mommy's finding treasures," she explained when Ethan asked what she was doing. She set up a magnifying glass for them to examine a circuit board, pointing out the different components. "See these tiny pieces? They're like little pieces of gold that most people throw away because they don't know how to find them." Noah, already showing an aptitude for patterns, began sorting small components into categories of his own design. Ethan preferred dramatic demolition, enthusiastically separating larger pieces under Lauren's careful supervision. What had begun as personal research became a family activity, educational for the boys and increasingly promising for Lauren. One evening, while the twins built towers from empty component boxes, Lauren had her breakthrough. She had been working on an algorithm, a set of rules for identifying reusable components in motherboards based on their electronic signatures. The current industry standard relied on manual inspection or broad categorization, resulting in missed opportunities and wasted resources. Lauren's approach was different. Using her data analysis background, she developed a software model that could predict with remarkable accuracy which components contained recoverable materials based on manufacturer, age, and usage patterns. When she ran her first complete simulation on her overworked laptop, the results were startling. Her method identified 38% more recoverable materials than standard industry processes. "It works," she whispered, staring at the screen in disbelief. "It actually works." The next morning, Lauren emailed her findings to Professor Zhang, an engineering instructor who had shown interest in her research during an online discussion forum. His response came just hours later. "This is genuinely innovative. Have you considered patenting this algorithm?" Patent. The word hung in Lauren's mind as she picked up the twins from preschool that afternoon. Patents required money for lawyers, filing fees, and the complex process of protecting intellectual property. Money she simply didn't have. When the boys started kindergarten that fall, Lauren found herself with precious additional hours to develop her idea. While they learned their ABCs and basic numbers, she refined her algorithm and expanded her research. The small market research company she worked for agreed to a flexible schedule, allowing her to use their database resources for her project in exchange for reduced hours. Lauren became a regular at the local library, using their computers when her own laptop struggled with complex calculations. The librarians grew accustomed to seeing her huddled over technical manuals, the twins quietly coloring beside her on early release days. "You should talk to my brother-in-law," suggested Ms. Patel, the head librarian, after observing Lauren's dedication for months. "He works for a sustainability startup. They're always looking for new ideas." This connection led to Lauren's first invitation to a local conference on green technology. The event was small, held in a community college gymnasium with handwritten name tags and folding chairs, but it represented her first opportunity to network with others in the field. "What do you mean we're going to a conference?" Ethan asked, wrinkling his nose as Lauren helped him into his least stained button-up shirt. "It's like a big meeting where people talk about ideas," Lauren explained, attempting to tame Noah's cowlick with a damp comb. "You'll bring your drawing pads and sit quietly while Mommy talks to some important people." The boys, now 5, were remarkably well-behaved as they sat in a corner of the gymnasium, drawing elaborate machines inspired by Lauren's research. Occasionally, attendees would smile at the industrious children, but most barely noticed them as Lauren navigated the room, business cards clutched nervously in hand. By day's end, Lauren had made 3 promising contacts: a recycling facility manager interested in testing her algorithm, an environmental engineer who offered technical advice, and a graduate student researching similar processes who suggested collaboration. None offered funding, but each represented a step toward legitimacy. It was during the drive home that Ethan asked the question Lauren had been dreading since the twins began noticing family structures different from their own. "Mommy, why don't we have a daddy like the other boys?" Lauren's hands tightened on the steering wheel as she carefully formulated her response. Some families are different, she explained, meeting their identical blue-gray eyes in the rearview mirror. Some have a mom and dad, some have two moms or two dads, and some, like ours, just have one parent. But why? Noah persisted, his analytical mind seeking the logical explanation that Lauren was reluctant to provide. Because sometimes grown-ups make choices about their lives, she said gently. I chose to have you and raise you because I love you more than anything in the world. We have each other, and that makes us very special. The answer satisfied them temporarily, though Lauren knew more difficult questions would come as they grew older. For now, she was grateful for their acceptance of the narrative she provided, a narrative that omitted the cruel rejection by a father who had dismissed them as a $5,000 problem. When the twins started first grade, Lauren took advantage of their full school days to accelerate her research. The local community college allowed her to use their computer lab during off hours in exchange for guest lectures in their business program. There, she finalized her algorithm and began drafting a formal patent application. One evening, as she explained her work to the twins, translating complex processes into terms 6-year-olds could understand, Noah's expression suddenly brightened with comprehension. "So you're finding hidden treasures inside old machines?" he asked, his eyes, so painfully like Trevor's, wide with understanding. "Exactly," Lauren confirmed, impressed by his grasp of the concept. "Most people just see garbage, but Mommy sees valuable things others have missed." The explanation became her standard description when discussing her project with non-technical contacts. Electronic treasure hunting resonated with people in a way that technical specifications didn't, opening doors to conversations that might otherwise have remained closed. By spring, Lauren had refined her patent application to the point where she could no longer delay the inevitable financial hurdle. Meeting with a local bank, she presented her business plan with careful preparation, explaining the potential market impact of her algorithm. "While your concept is interesting, Ms. Mitchell," the loan officer said, reviewing her application, "we require more substantial collateral for business loans. As a single parent with limited assets and no commercial history, you present a significant risk profile." Rejection stung, but didn't surprise her. Lauren had faced enough dismissals to recognize their patterns. Gathering her documents, she thanked the officer politely and left with her dignity intact, already calculating alternative approaches. That night, Lauren emptied her emergency fund, $8,500 carefully accumulated over 5 years of ruthless budgeting and occasional freelance projects. The sum represented security, a safety net for her small family. Using it for a patent application meant risking their stability for a chance at something more. "Worth it," she whispered, transferring the funds to her checking account. The boys deserved more than a basement apartment and second-hand clothes. They deserved the future she'd promised them the night Trevor had discarded them all. Hands trembling slightly, Lauren submitted her patent application online, the $8,500 transferred for filing fees and legal requirements. Half terrified, half exhilarated, she closed her laptop and checked on her sleeping sons, their identical faces peaceful in the glow of their nightlight. While sending her patent application with trembling hands, Lauren didn't know that within a decade she would be registering her 100th patent and declining a $500 million acquisition offer from Reynolds Holdings itself. The envelope arrived on a crisp autumn morning in 2014, its official seal and watermarked paper announcing its importance before Lauren even broke the seal. Her hands trembled as she slid a finger beneath the flap, the twins watching curiously from their spots at the small kitchen table. "Is it something good, Mommy?" Ethan asked, milk dribbling down his chin. The patent office letterhead came into view, and Lauren's breath caught. She scanned the formal language quickly, her eyes finding the words she'd been hoping for. "Patent application number 1376492 has been approved." "Yes," she whispered, then louder, a laugh bubbling up from somewhere deep inside her. "Yes, it's very good." She swept both boys up in a spontaneous dance around the kitchen, their giggles mixing with her laughter. "We're celebrating tonight. Ice cream for everyone! Later that evening, after the twins had been tucked into bed with sticky smiles from their budget celebration, Lauren sat at her desk and traced the embossed seal on her patent certificate. It validated more than just her algorithm. It validated her vision, her persistence, her refusal to be defined by Trevor's dismissal. The elation of patent approval quickly gave way to the next challenge, turning intellectual property into a viable business. Lauren compiled a detailed business plan, projecting conservative growth based on her market research. With patent in hand, she began approaching potential investors. "Your technology is interesting," said a venture capitalist at her third meeting, barely glancing at her meticulously prepared presentation. "But electronic waste processing is a narrow field with thin margins. What's your scale-up strategy?" "I've identified 3 potential partnership models," Lauren began, but he cut her off with a wave. "The bigger question is who's running day-to-day operations while you're handling," he gestured vaguely, "parenting responsibilities?" Lauren maintained her professional composure. "I've outlined a flexible management structure that accommodates all aspects of my life." "Look, Ms. Mitchell," he sighed, closing her folder, "single parenthood is admirable, but startups require 18-hour days. Perhaps consider licensing your patent to an established company instead." This pattern repeated across a dozen meetings. When not being dismissed outright for her status as a single mother, investors questioned her technical expertise despite her patent, or suggested her idea was interesting but too risky. After one particularly demoralizing meeting where an investor had spent more time asking about her childcare arrangements than her technology, Lauren sat in her car and allowed herself 5 minutes of pure frustration. Then she wiped her eyes, reapplied her lipstick, and drove to pick up the twins from their after-school program. That evening, while scanning an online forum for female entrepreneurs, Lauren discovered a post about the MIT Women's Entrepreneurship Initiative, a program offering seed funding and mentorship to women-led startups focused on sustainable technology. "Application deadline, 3 days," she read aloud, her pulse quickening. For the next 72 hours, Lauren barely slept. She refined her presentation, compiled comprehensive financial projections, and recorded a video demonstration of her algorithm identifying recoverable components in discarded electronics. The twins helped by sorting circuit boards by color and shape, turning the application process into a family project. "Done," she whispered, clicking submit at 2:38 in the morning, just hours before the deadline. She fell asleep at her desk, waking only when Ethan poked her cheek. "Mommy, it's school time. Your face has keyboard marks." Weeks passed without word from MIT. Lauren continued her data analysis job, squeezing in follow-up emails to potential investors during lunch breaks and developing her business plan after the twins' bedtime. Her patent certificate hung framed above her desk, a reminder that at least one official entity believed in her innovation. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon as Lauren was helping the twins with simple addition at the kitchen table. "Ms. Mitchell? This is Dr. Eleanor Reeves from the MIT Women's Entrepreneurship Initiative. We're intrigued by your application and would like you to present to our selection committee next Thursday." Lauren's heart raced. "I'd be honored. However, I should mention that I have 7-year-old twins and limited childcare options for overnight trips." There was a pause. Then Dr. Reeves responded with unexpected warmth. "Bring them. We'll arrange accommodations. This program exists precisely because traditional investment pathways fail to accommodate women's realities." The following week found Lauren in a modest hotel room near MIT's campus, ironing her one professional outfit while the twins bounced excitedly on the double bed. "Remember," she instructed, rehearsing their behavior plan, "tomorrow you'll sit quietly with your activity books while Mommy gives her presentation. This is very important." "We know," they chorused. Noah added solemnly, "This is so you can make your treasure-finding machine real." The next morning, Lauren stood before the selection committee of 5 accomplished women, her palms damp but her voice steady. The twins sat remarkably still in chairs against the wall, absorbed in their activity books as promised. Electronic waste represents not just an environmental crisis, but a massive economic opportunity, Lauren began, clicking to her first slide. Current recovery methods extract only 23% of valuable materials from discarded devices. My algorithm increases that to 61% by identifying components previously overlooked. For 40 minutes, she laid out her vision, methodology, and market analysis. When she demonstrated the software prototype, running a virtual scan of circuit board images with real-time identification of recoverable elements, she saw the shift in the committee's expressions, from polite interest to genuine engagement. "Your approach is elegant," noted Dr. Reeves during the question period. "What's your primary barrier to implementation?" "Capital," Lauren answered honestly. "I need $50,000 to develop a commercial version of the software and construct a small-scale processing facility to demonstrate proof of concept." After the presentation, as Lauren helped the twins pack their activity books, Dr. Reeves approached with a smile. "We'll be in touch within 2 weeks. But off the record, Ms. Mitchell, that was the most impressive presentation we've seen this cycle." 13 days later, Lauren received the email that would change everything. "The committee is pleased to offer you initial funding of $50,000 to launch Mitchell Innovation." She read the message 3 times before the reality sank in. This wasn't just money. It was validation, opportunity, the first real step toward the future she'd promised her sons on that snowy night years ago. With the funding secured, Lauren moved quickly. She rented a small office space in a converted warehouse in Brooklyn. Affordable because it was unfashionable and slightly inconvenient, but clean and professional enough for client meetings. Next, she hired 2 recent engineering graduates who were more excited by the technology than deterred by the startup's modest beginnings. "Welcome to Mitchell Innovation," she told Raj and Sophia on their first day, gesturing around the sparse office with its second-hand furniture and single conference table. "It doesn't look like much now, but we're going to change how the world handles electronic waste." The twins, now 7, visited the office after school, setting up a homework station in the corner while Lauren and her small team refined the commercial version of her algorithm. Their presence became so normal that when clients visited, they simply worked their way into the company narrative. "My sons are the reason I became interested in sustainability," Lauren would explain as the boys demonstrated remarkable politeness to visitors. "We're building a better future, quite literally, for the next generation." As summer approached, the twins' teacher requested a meeting with Lauren, expecting concerns about their occasional tardiness on days when the office demanded her early attention. She was surprised by the actual topic. "Mrs. Mitchell, have you had Ethan and Noah tested for the gifted program?" the teacher asked, spreading out a collection of their work. "Their aptitude, particularly Ethan's in science and Noah's in mathematics, is remarkable for their age." Lauren examined the papers, complex patterns Noah had created during free time, detailed drawings of circuit boards Ethan had produced from memory after visiting the office. "They've been exposed to a lot of technical concepts," she explained cautiously. "This goes beyond exposure," the teacher insisted. "This is natural ability that should be nurtured." The following weeks brought evaluations and ultimately acceptance into a specialized program for gifted children. The scholarship covered most costs, but still required sacrifices in Lauren's already tight budget. Without hesitation, she redirected funds from her planned office expansion to secure the educational opportunity for her sons. By fall, Mitchell Innovation had secured its first significant contract, a partnership with a local recycling cooperative looking to improve their electronic waste processing. The project was small by industry standards, but perfect for proving Lauren's concept in real-world conditions. "We're recovering 38% more gold and 42% more rare earth elements than their previous method," she reported to her team after the first month of implementation. The modest conference room erupted in cheers. That evening, after the twins were asleep, Lauren stayed up late researching the Sustainable Technology Conference in Chicago, the premier industry event where major players showcased innovations and, crucially, where investors looking for the next big thing gathered in force. The registration fee alone was steep, nearly $1,000, not counting travel expenses and accommodations. Lauren created a spreadsheet, calculating exactly how much she would need to save each week to afford the trip 6 months from now. "Worth every penny if it puts us on the map," she murmured, finalizing her budget. The next morning, Lauren received confirmation of her registration, the payment having cleaned out her personal savings. Looking at the framed photo of the twins on her desk, she felt a surge of determination. "It's starting," she whispered, touching their smiling faces through the glass. Registering for the Chicago conference, Lauren couldn't imagine that 3 years later she would be the keynote speaker, nor that among the attendees would be a desperate Trevor Reynolds trying to rebuild his declining career. The conference hall emptied as Lauren gathered her presentation materials, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Her pitch at the Chicago Sustainable Technology Conference had gone better than she'd dared hope. The questions from the audience had been engaged, technical, and, most importantly, respectful. No one had asked about her childcare arrangements or suggested her algorithm was cute. They had treated her like what she was, an innovator with a potentially industry-changing technology. "Ms. Mitchell?" A tall man in an impeccable suit approached as Lauren packed her laptop. "Victor Abernathy, Green Tech Ventures. That was quite impressive." Lauren straightened, extending her hand with newfound confidence. "Thank you, Mr. Abernathy." "Please, Victor." His handshake was firm, his gaze direct. "I'd like to discuss your company's future. Are you free for dinner?" 2 hours later, seated in a restaurant far more expensive than her conference budget allowed, Lauren listened as Victor outlined a proposition that made her heart race. $250,000, he said, swirling his wine, for 15% equity, enough to properly develop your technology and expand your team, with my firm's connections throughout the industry at your disposal. Lauren maintained her composure, though beneath the table her fingers twisted in her napkin. This was more than 10 times her initial investment from MIT. It would change everything. "I'll need to review the terms carefully," she said, professional despite her excitement. Victor smiled. "Of course, but I should warn you, I don't typically chase entrepreneurs. When I see something promising, I move quickly." 3 weeks later, Lauren stood in an empty office space in Brooklyn, twice the size of her original location. Sunlight streamed through windows that actually opened. The building had a functional elevator, working bathrooms on each floor, and, luxury of luxuries, dedicated parking spots. "It's perfect," she told the realtor, already envisioning workstations and testing areas. With Victor's investment finalized, Lauren moved quickly. She hired 3 additional engineers, purchased proper testing equipment, and implemented the accounting software that had previously been beyond her budget. Mitchell Innovation was transforming from a struggling startup into a legitimate business. The twins, now 8 years old, were delighted by the new office's dedicated homework zone, a small area with desks and educational materials where they could spend time after school while Lauren worked. "Is this all ours?" Ethan asked, spinning in a proper office chair for the first time. "It's all ours," Lauren confirmed, watching her sons explore the space. "And it's just the beginning." The following months brought a whirlwind of growth. Lauren refined her algorithm into a more sophisticated system, capable of analyzing entire batches of electronic waste simultaneously. She filed for 2 additional patents, extensions of her original technology that improved efficiency by 27%. By the summer of 2017, Mitchell Innovation had grown to 12 employees. Their client list expanded from local recycling cooperatives to mid-sized technology manufacturers interested in reclaiming materials from their own waste streams. Each success built upon the last, validating Lauren's vision and reinforcing her determination. The twins thrived alongside the company. Their gifted program challenged them academically, while time spent at the office exposed them to real-world applications of their studies. Ethan developed a particular fascination with chemistry, conducting simple experiments under the supervision of the company's materials specialist. Noah gravitated toward coding, sitting for hours with the software team, absorbing concepts far beyond his years. "They're extraordinary children," remarked Dr. Williams during their annual evaluation at school. Ethan's understanding of molecular structures and Noah's aptitude for algorithmic thinking are unprecedented in our program's history. Lauren swallowed the lump of pride in her throat. "They work very hard." "It's more than hard work, Ms. Mitchell. This is raw talent being nurtured in an exceptional environment." The doctor hesitated. "We'd like to recommend them for the Young Scientists Initiative. It's highly selective, but I believe they would thrive there." The prestigious program would place additional financial strain on Lauren's still precarious personal finances. The company was growing, but she took only a modest salary, reinvesting most profits. Yet once again, she didn't hesitate to prioritize her son's education. In the autumn of 2017, Lauren traveled to Boston for an environmental engineering symposium. Mitchell Innovation was gaining enough recognition that she had been invited as a panel speaker, a significant step up from simply attending conferences. The real challenge in electronic waste processing isn't technical, it's changing perceptions, Lauren explained to the audience. We need to stop seeing discarded devices as waste and start recognizing them as urban mines of precious materials. After the panel, a distinguished man with silver-streaked hair approached her. "Fascinating perspective, Ms. Mitchell. James Chen, MIT Environmental Engineering." Lauren recognized the name immediately. "Professor Chen, your paper on sustainable materials recovery was instrumental in my research." James smiled, his eyes crinkling warmly. "I'm flattered. Would you have time for coffee? I'd love to hear more about your practical applications." Coffee extended into dinner as they discovered shared passions beyond recycling technology. James had pioneered research in sustainable materials but lacked Lauren's entrepreneurial approach. Their conversation flowed effortlessly from technical details to broader philosophical questions about environmental responsibility. "Your children are fortunate to grow up with such a powerful example," James commented when Lauren mentioned the twins. "I'm the fortunate one," she replied. "They're my motivation for everything." Back in New York, Lauren found herself thinking about Professor Chen more often than she expected. When he emailed a week later about a research paper relevant to her work, she responded immediately. Their professional correspondence gradually expanded to include personal updates and gentle humor. In January of 2018, James visited New York for a conference and asked to see Mitchell Innovation's facilities. Lauren gave him the full tour, introducing her growing team and demonstrating their improved processing methods. "I'd like to meet these remarkable sons I've heard so much about," James said as they finished the tour. That evening, James joined Lauren and the twins for dinner at their apartment, the first guest Lauren had invited into their personal space in years. She watched nervously as the boys sized up this stranger, their natural reserve evident. "Mom says you know everything about sustainable materials," Ethan finally said, breaking the ice. James laughed. "Hardly everything. In fact, I've been stuck on a problem with polymer degradation that I bet you two might have fresh ideas about." By dessert, the twins were clustered around James at the kitchen table, an impromptu science lesson underway as they discussed experimental approaches to his research question. Lauren observed from the periphery, struck by the easy rapport between this accomplished man and her children. "They're extraordinary," James told her later, after the boys had gone to bed. "Their minds work at levels I typically see in graduate students." "They amaze me every day," Lauren agreed, pouring them each a glass of wine. "And what about their father?" James asked carefully. "If you don't mind my asking." Lauren tensed slightly, then consciously relaxed. "Not in the picture. By his choice." James nodded, not pressing further. "His profound loss, then." Their relationship developed slowly, cautiously. James respected the boundaries Lauren established, understanding that her sons would always be her priority. He returned to New York regularly, each visit including time with the twins, who grew increasingly comfortable with his presence. "I like Professor James," Noah declared after a Saturday spent at the Museum of Natural History with him. "He doesn't talk to us like we're babies." "He listens to our ideas," Ethan added. "Like really listens." In the spring, Mitchell Innovation secured its first major corporate contract, an agreement with a mid-sized electronics manufacturer to process their entire waste stream using Lauren's technology. The deal meant hiring additional staff and expanding their processing capacity. "This is the breakthrough we've been working toward," Lauren told her team, struggling to contain her excitement. "From here, we can demonstrate scalability to even larger clients." That night, she called James to share the news. His genuine joy at her success warmed her in a way she hadn't experienced in years. "I never doubted you," he said. "From our first conversation, I knew you would change the industry." By summer, Mitchell Innovation had outgrown its Brooklyn location. With 30 employees and contracts requiring significant processing volume, Lauren relocated the company to a larger facility in Cambridge, Massachusetts, closer to both MIT's resources and to James. The move meant changing schools for the twins, now 10 years old, but the prestigious Young Scientists program had campuses in both cities. Lauren approached the transition with careful planning, ensuring her sons understood each step of the process. "Will we see Professor James more?" Noah asked as they toured their new apartment. "Probably," Lauren answered carefully. "Would that be okay with you?" Both boys nodded with surprising enthusiasm. The Cambridge facility transformed Mitchell Innovation from a promising startup to an established player in sustainable technology. Its proximity to MIT created opportunities for research partnerships and access to top engineering talent. Lauren hired strategically, building a diverse team united by their commitment to her vision. In November of 2018, Forbes magazine featured Mitchell Innovation in its Companies to Watch section. The article highlighted Lauren's innovative approach and the company's rapid growth trajectory. The morning after publication, Lauren arrived at the office to find her team had framed the article, hanging it prominently in the reception area. "To our fearless leader," the inscription read, "from impossible to inevitable." Lauren's phone rang constantly that day, reporters seeking interviews, potential clients exploring partnerships, and even a few investors who had previously rejected her pitch now expressing renewed interest. She handled each call with the same calm professionalism, neither gloating over the validation nor betraying how significant this recognition felt. That evening, as the twins proudly displayed the magazine to James over dinner at their apartment, Lauren felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. The path from that snowy night in Manhattan to this moment had been arduous, but looking at her sons' bright faces and the warm respect in James's eyes, she knew every struggle had been worthwhile. Later, after the boys had gone to bed, James took her hand across the kitchen table. "Lauren, I need to tell you something." She tensed, years of self-protection kicking in automatically. "These past months have been the happiest of my life," he continued. "I love your brilliant mind, your determination, and those remarkable boys. I don't want to rush you, but I want you to know, I'm not going anywhere." Lauren felt tears prick her eyes as she squeezed his hand. "The boys are my priority," she said softly. "They always will be. It's one of the countless reasons I admire you," James replied. "I'm not asking to replace anything in your life, just to be part of your journey, whatever that looks like." While discussing the terms of the partnership agreement with her new corporate client, Lauren didn't know this would be just the beginning of a meteoric rise that would, in just 2 years, transform her into one of the most powerful women in the tech sector, drawing attention even from the declining Reynolds Holdings. The partnership with Megatech transformed Mitchell Innovation overnight. Lauren still remembered signing the contract, the weight of the fountain pen in her hand as she committed her signature to the document that would catapult her company into global relevance. The agreement leveraged her patented technology across Megatech's international recycling operations, implementing her algorithms in facilities across 3 continents. "To the future of sustainable technology," the Megatech CEO had said, raising a champagne flute. Lauren had smiled, thinking of the long journey from that snowy night in Manhattan to this gleaming boardroom, to finding value where others see only waste. By early 2019, Lauren's technology was being implemented globally, recovering millions of dollars in precious metals and rare earth elements from discarded electronics, while significantly reducing environmental impact. Quarterly reports showed efficiency improvements of 63% in Megatech's recycling operations, exceeding even Lauren's optimistic projections. Her company expanded rapidly, moving from 30 employees to over 100 within 6 months. The Cambridge facility doubled in size, and Lauren opened a research division dedicated to developing next-generation recycling technologies. At 37, she found herself at the helm of a company valued at over $1 billion, her name increasingly mentioned alongside established tech leaders. Mitchell Innovation stock up 17% following expanded Asian operations, announced the financial news ticker one morning as Lauren prepared breakfast for the twins. "That's you, Mom!" Ethan exclaimed, pointing at the television with his spoon. At 12, he had developed his mother's sharp business instincts alongside his growing expertise in chemistry. "Does this mean we're rich?" asked Noah, his analytical mind always focused on practical implications. Lauren smiled, setting plates of whole-grain waffles before them. "It means our company is valuable. More importantly, it means we're helping solve a global problem." The boys had blossomed alongside the company. Ethan's experiments with chemical extraction methods had already yielded a process for recovering lithium from damaged batteries that Mitchell Innovation was in the process of patenting, with Ethan listed as co-inventor. Noah's talent for algorithmic thinking had evolved into a genuine gift for programming. He had developed modifications to Lauren's original algorithm that improved identification accuracy by 12%. Their academic achievements matched their entrepreneurial promise. Both had published papers in peer-reviewed journals, an unprecedented accomplishment for 12-year-olds, and had been featured in educational magazines as prodigies in their respective fields. One morning in April, Lauren sat in her glass-walled office reviewing acquisition proposals when her assistant interrupted with an urgent message. "Ethan's school called. He's in the nurse's office with a fever." Without hesitation, Lauren handed the acquisition folder to her CFO. "Thomas, please reschedule the investor call. Family emergency." "But Lauren, these Japanese investors adjusted their schedule specifically to reschedule," she repeated firmly, already gathering her things. "They'll understand, or they're not partners we want." 20 minutes later, Lauren sat beside a pale Ethan in the school nurse's office, her hand cool against his forehead as they waited for the doctor's appointment she'd arranged. Her phone buzzed constantly with meeting alerts and messages, all ignored. "Sorry about your meeting, Mom," Ethan mumbled, eyes heavy with fever. Lauren brushed his dark hair from his forehead, hair that increasingly reminded her of Trevor's. "Nothing is more important than you and Noah. Nothing." That evening, as Lauren worked from home while monitoring Ethan's temperature, her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Lauren Mitchell," she answered, voice clipped and professional. "Ms. Mitchell, this is Barbara Walden from Business Forward magazine. We're profiling top female executives for our annual Women in Leadership issue, and your name is at the top of our list." The interview request was one of dozens Lauren had received in recent months as her profile rose in the business world. Unlike many tech CEOs who cultivated personal brands alongside their companies, Lauren had maintained a deliberate privacy around her personal life, focusing media attention on Mitchell Innovation's technology rather than her journey. "I'd be happy to discuss our company's advances in sustainable technology," Lauren responded carefully. "Wonderful," Barbara replied. "And of course our readers would be fascinated by your journey as a single mother building a billion-dollar company." Quite inspiring. Lauren's grip tightened on her phone. My children are not part of the interview scope. There was a pause. I understand privacy concerns, Ms. Mitchell, but your success as both a mother and CEO is remarkable. Surely, my success as a CEO is relevant to your business publication. My parenting is not. Lauren's tone left no room for negotiation. After arranging the interview with clear boundaries established, Lauren checked on Ethan before joining Noah at the kitchen table where he was coding a new simulation program. "Why don't you talk about us in interviews?" Noah asked without looking up from his laptop, having obviously overheard her conversation. Lauren considered her answer carefully. "Because you deserve privacy to be yourselves, not the Mitchell twins or extensions of my public profile." Noah nodded thoughtfully. "Is it also because of our biological father?" The question caught Lauren off guard. Though the twins occasionally asked about their father, they had never used the term biological father before, a distinction that suggested growing awareness. "Partly," she admitted. "Why do you ask?" Noah shrugged. His blue-gray eyes, Trevor's eyes, focused on his screen. "Just curious. Kids at school Google their parents. There's lots about you, but nothing about him." "That's because he chose not to be part of our family," Lauren said gently. "But that's his loss, not ours." The conversation lingered in Lauren's mind that night as she reviewed the latest product development reports. The twins were growing up, becoming more aware of the world and their place in it. The simplistic explanations of their early childhood would soon be insufficient. June brought another milestone for Mitchell Innovation. Lauren stood before investors and media at the company's annual presentation, unveiling a revolutionary process for extracting rare earth elements that reduced chemical waste by 70% while improving yield. "This technology redefines what's possible in electronic recycling," she explained, commanding the attention of everyone in the room. "The environmental impact alone justifies implementation, but the economic advantages make it inevitable." The presentation concluded with the announcement of Mitchell Innovation's valuation at $4.2 billion, a figure that placed Lauren among the most successful female entrepreneurs in American history. As applause filled the auditorium, she caught a glimpse of James in the front row, his proud smile warming her from across the room. Their relationship had deepened over the past 2 years, evolving from friendship to something much more significant. James had integrated seamlessly into their family life, his patience and genuine interest in the twins earning their respect and affection. 6 months earlier, he had proposed during a quiet dinner at home, presenting Lauren with a simple but elegant ring. "I'm not asking to replace anyone or change what you've built," he had said. "I'm asking to add my support to your journey, whatever form that takes." Lauren had accepted, surprising herself with how right it felt. The wedding was planned for autumn, a small private ceremony with the twins serving as James's best men. Though her personal and professional lives were flourishing, Lauren couldn't escape occasional reminders of Trevor. Business publications sometimes mentioned Reynolds Holdings in the same articles as Mitchell Innovation, though the contexts couldn't be more different. While Lauren's company soared, Reynolds Holdings struggled through a series of poor investments and management scandals. One evening, James found Lauren in her home office, staring at a financial news report about Reynolds Holdings' 4th consecutive quarter of losses. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, setting a cup of tea beside her. Lauren gestured to the screen. "Trevor Reynolds is losing his family's company. The board is considering removing him as CEO." James studied her expression carefully. "Does that bring any satisfaction?" "It should, shouldn't it?" Lauren sighed. "But mostly I feel nothing. He's become irrelevant to our story." "Have you ever told the boys about him?" James asked, the question gentle but direct. Lauren shook her head. "They've asked about their father in general terms, but never specifically enough that I felt they needed the full truth. They've never lacked for positive male influence, especially since you came into our lives." The conversation shifted to wedding plans, but the question lingered in Lauren's mind. The twins were growing into young men who deserved to know their full history. Yet Lauren had protected them from Trevor's rejection for so long that finding the right moment seemed impossible. July brought an invitation that would ultimately force the issue. Lauren received a formal request to be the keynote speaker at the annual Sustainable Technology Conference in Chicago, the same conference where years earlier she had been just another attendee desperately networking for opportunities. "Of course we'll attend," James said when she showed him the invitation. "This is the perfect showcase for the company's latest innovations." Lauren agreed, though something about returning to Chicago as a headliner rather than a hopeful entrepreneur felt like closing a circle. She hadn't realized how significant that circle would become. The morning of her acceptance, Lauren was reviewing the latest acquisition offer for Mitchell Innovations' biotech division when her assistant delivered the newest issue of Fortune magazine. On the cover was Trevor Reynolds, looking considerably older than she remembered, leaving a federal courthouse. The headline read, "The Fall of House Reynolds: How Trevor Reynolds Lost His Family's Media Empire." Lauren read the article with clinical detachment. According to Fortune, Reynolds Holdings had lost 70% of its value following accounting fraud investigations. Trevor, removed as CEO by the board, retained only 12% ownership of the company his grandfather had founded. The final paragraph mentioned his desperate attempt to launch a streaming platform with his remaining capital, a venture analysts predicted would fail within 18 months. "Interesting," Lauren commented, handing the magazine back to her assistant. "Schedule a meeting with legal, please. I want to discuss the possibility of acquiring Reynolds' digital division." That evening, Lauren watched the twins work on their science fair project, a functional model demonstrating efficient reclamation of precious metals from circuit boards. Their heads bent together over the workbench, they were the perfect blend of her determination and, though she rarely acknowledged it, Trevor's intellect. In 1 week, they would all travel to Chicago, where Lauren would deliver the keynote address at the conference while the twins attended the Youth Science Symposium running concurrently. She had no way of knowing that the trip would bring a collision of past and present that would forever change their family narrative. Accepting the invitation to the Chicago conference, Lauren couldn't foresee that this would be the arena where past and present would violently collide and where Trevor Reynolds would finally face the consequences of his choices from 15 years ago. The Peninsula Hotel stood like a gleaming monument to luxury in the heart of Chicago, its limestone facade catching the late afternoon sunlight as Lauren's town car pulled to a stop at the entrance. Doormen in crisp uniforms rushed forward, opening doors for the Mitchell family with practiced deference. "Welcome to the Peninsula, Ms. Mitchell," the concierge greeted her, recognition immediate in his eyes. "We've been expecting you. Your suite is ready." Lauren nodded her thanks, one hand resting lightly on each twin's shoulder as they absorbed the opulence of the marble-floored lobby. The contrast between this reception and her first visit to Chicago years ago, when she'd stayed at a budget hotel miles from the conference center, wasn't lost on her. "This place is incredible," Ethan whispered, his eyes wide as they followed a bellhop toward the elevator. "It's approximately 37 times larger than our first apartment," Noah added, ever precise in his calculations. The presidential suite occupied the top floor, offering panoramic views of the Chicago skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. The twins immediately claimed the second bedroom, exclaiming over the technological amenities while Lauren reviewed her conference schedule with her assistant Amy via video call. "Your keynote is at 10 tomorrow morning, followed by the executive luncheon," Amy reminded her. "The boys' science symposium orientation begins at 9 in the adjacent building." Lauren thanked her and ended the call, turning to find James arranging her presentation materials on the suite's desk. "Nervous?" he asked, noting the slight tension in her shoulders. "Not about the presentation," Lauren admitted. "But coming back here, where it all started in a way, it feels significant." James kissed her forehead gently. Full-circle moments usually do. The following morning, Lauren stood before the mirror in the suite's marble bathroom, adjusting her tailored Armani blazer. At 39, she cut an impressive figure, confident, polished, worlds away from the desperate young woman who had once wandered Manhattan's snowy streets with a crumpled check in her pocket. In the living room, she found the twins helping each other with matching navy ties, their dark hair neatly combed, their blue-gray eyes serious as they prepared for their role as Mitchell Innovation representatives at the Youth Symposium. "Remember," Lauren reminded them as they rode the elevator down, "you're not just my sons today. You're ambassadors of Mitchell Innovation." "Understood, boss," Ethan replied with a playful salute that didn't quite mask his pride. They parted in the hotel lobby, James accompanying the twins to their symposium while Lauren proceeded to the conference center. Her heart inexplicably quickened as she entered the building, an undefined premonition settling in her chest. Across the city, Trevor Reynolds stood before his own hotel mirror, though in significantly less luxurious surroundings. At 47, his face showed the strain of recent years, lines etched around his eyes, silver threading through the hair at his temples. He adjusted his tie with hands that weren't quite steady, then checked his wallet to confirm his conference pass was there. Once, he would have been among the honored guests at such events. Now, he was just another attendee, hoping to forge connections that might save his floundering streaming venture. The irony wasn't lost on him, begging for meetings with the same type of people who had once sought his attention. The conference center bustled with activity when Trevor arrived. He approached the registration desk, conscious of how different this experience was from previous years. "Trevor Reynolds," he stated, the name that had once opened doors now met with indifferent efficiency. The receptionist barely glanced up. "Here's your badge, Mr. Reynolds." She handed him a standard attendee pass, lacking the golden stripe of keynote speakers or the blue of VIPs. Trevor made his way to the bar, ordering a double scotch despite the early hour. Liquid courage, he told himself, before facing potential investors who had already rejected his preliminary proposals. As he surveyed the room, he noted familiar faces: tech entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, sustainability experts, all engaged in animated conversation, none acknowledging his presence. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The conference will begin in 5 minutes," announced the master of ceremonies over the sound system. Trevor found his assigned seat in row 12, far from the stage. He flipped through the program, scanning the schedule until his eyes caught on the keynote speaker's name: Lauren Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell Innovation, the Circular Economy Revolution. The name triggered a vague sense of familiarity. A competitor he'd met at previous events, perhaps? Someone from a forgotten business dinner? He couldn't place it, though something about the name nagged at his memory. The lights dimmed as Trevor was still pondering, and the announcer took the stage. "It is my great pleasure to welcome the visionary whose company has transformed the concept of electronic waste recycling, increasing its market value from zero to over $4 billion in just a decade. Forbes magazine has ranked her the third most influential woman in American business. Please welcome Lauren Mitchell." Polite applause filled the hall as a slender woman with dark hair styled in an elegant bob walked confidently to the podium. Trevor squinted slightly, trying to place her. There was something in her posture, the set of her shoulders. Then she turned to face the audience, her gaze sweeping across the hall, and recognition hit Trevor like a physical blow. The Scotch glass slipped from his suddenly nerveless fingers, spilling amber liquid across his trousers. It was her, the waitress from Brooklyn, the girl he'd gotten pregnant, the complication he'd tried to solve with $5,000 15 years ago. But how? Lauren Mitchell, the billionaire recycling mogul, was that Lauren? While Trevor struggled to process this revelation, his eyes were drawn to the front row where two teenagers sat, identical in their navy blazers and serious expressions. One of them turned to whisper something to the other, and Trevor felt his heart seize. Those eyes. The same blue-gray eyes he saw in the mirror every morning. The same eyes his father and grandfather had passed down through generations of Reynolds men. Over the past decade, Mitchell Innovation has revolutionized how we approach electronic waste, Lauren began, her voice confident and measured as it carried through the hall. We've transformed a global problem into an opportunity. developing technologies that extract rare materials from discarded devices, dramatically reducing the need for destructive mining practices. Trevor barely registered her words, his mind fixated on the teenagers, his sons, and the powerful woman he had so cruelly rejected all those years ago. Lauren's presentation was flawless, precise data, compelling projections, impressive statistics about how her company not only generated substantial profits, but significantly reduced the environmental impact of the technology industry. Mitchell Innovations' success proves that doing good can be extraordinarily profitable, she concluded with quiet confidence. Sometimes we need someone to tell us we're not enough to prove that we're extraordinary. Thank you to those who doubted. Her gaze traveled across the audience, and for the briefest moment Trevor was certain she looked directly at him. The almost imperceptible stiffening of her posture was the only indication that she'd recognized him. When the presentation ended, the hall transformed for the networking reception. Trevor remained frozen in his seat while the crowd gave Lauren a standing ovation. Executives rushed to surround her, business cards exchanged, hands eager to shake hers. Trevor finally gathered enough courage to approach, weaving through the crowd of CEOs and investors orbiting around her. Lauren was engaged in conversation with the CEO of Tesla when Trevor appeared at the periphery of her circle. For a moment, their eyes locked. There was no surprise in her gaze, only a glacial calm that suggested she had long prepared for this possibility. "Lauren," he managed, his voice weaker than he'd intended. "Trevor Reynolds," she replied with the same polite formality she might use with any distant acquaintance. What a surprise. Could we talk? Privately?" The desperation in his voice was unmistakable. Lauren smiled professionally. "I'm in the middle of several important meetings. Perhaps another time." She turned back to continue her conversation, but Trevor, driven by a mounting sense of panic, touched her arm lightly. "Please, 5 minutes." Lauren looked pointedly at his hand on her arm, then back to his face. "Very well. 5 minutes." They moved to a quieter corner of the reception hall. Trevor visibly trembled, his composed facade crumbling. "Why did you never tell me about them?" he whispered urgently. Lauren raised a single eyebrow. "About them? The boys, my sons. You offered $5,000 to solve the problem and called me a burden," she replied, her voice controlled but loud enough for nearby executives to overhear. "Your sons deserve better than a man who considered them a mistake." Trevor paled, glancing nervously at the interested observers. "Lauren, I was young, stupid. I made a terrible mistake." "No, Trevor. You made a deliberate decision," she corrected calmly. "And so did I. I decided to raise my sons without the toxicity of a man who valued our lives at $5,000. At that moment, the twins approached, oblivious to the charged atmosphere. "Mom, Dr. Thompson from MIT wants to discuss our research on biodegradable polymers," one of them said. Lauren smiled affectionately. "Trevor, these are Ethan and Noah Mitchell. Boys, this is an old acquaintance, Trevor Reynolds." The teenagers extended their hands politely, completely unaware of who he truly was. Trevor shook them mechanically, unable to form coherent words as he stared into eyes identical to his own. "Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Reynolds," Noah said courteously. "We read about your company," added Ethan. "Sorry about your recent setbacks." Lauren placed her hands protectively on her son's shoulders. "Ethan and Noah have just received full scholarships to Harvard. Ethan developed a method for extracting lithium from used batteries that we're patenting, and Noah created an AI algorithm that identifies reusable components with 99.8% accuracy." Trevor stared in mute shock at the young prodigies, his sons, as the full reality of all he had lost hit him with devastating force. "Now, if you'll excuse us," Lauren continued smoothly, "we have that meeting with the president in Washington tomorrow. We need to depart within the hour." As they walked away, Trevor noticed the curious glances from executives around them. Some whispered to each other, connecting the dots as they observed the unmistakable resemblance between him and the twins. His attempt at redemption had transformed into public humiliation. The woman he had discarded was now a business powerhouse, and the sons he had rejected were prodigies destined to shine even brighter than either of their parents. While Lauren guided her sons away with her head held high, she didn't know that before sunrise, her confrontation with Trevor would be headline news on every major business portal, forcing her to finally tell the twins the truth she had guarded for 14 years. The relative privacy of their corner in the reception hall provided only the thinnest veneer of discretion. Lauren stood composed, her posture impeccable in her tailored suit, while Trevor visibly trembled, sweat beading at his temples despite the room's careful climate control. Around them, conversations continued, but Lauren noted several executives casting curious glances their way, pretending not to eavesdrop. "Why did you never tell me about them?" Trevor whispered urgently, his eyes darting back to the twins now conversing with a Nobel Prize-winning scientist across the room. Lauren raised a single eyebrow, her expression coolly detached. "About them?" "The boys. My sons." His voice cracked slightly on the final word. "You offered $5,000 to solve the problem and called me a burden," she replied, her voice measured but deliberately loud enough for nearby executives to overhear. "Your sons deserve better than a man who considered them a mistake." Trevor paled, glancing nervously at the interested observers now barely concealing their attention. The man who had once dominated boardrooms now appeared diminished, his once commanding presence replaced by fidgeting anxiety. "Lauren, I was young, stupid, I made a terrible mistake," he pleaded, his voice barely above a whisper. "No, Trevor. You made a deliberate decision," she corrected him calmly. "And so did I. I decided to raise my sons without the toxicity of a man who valued our lives at $5,000. The words struck him like physical blows. Trevor flinched at each one, particularly at the mention of the amount, that paltry sum he'd scribbled on a check while dismissing her from his life. Lauren watched his reaction with clinical detachment, noting how his designer suit, once a symbol of his power, now seemed to hang slightly loose on his frame, as though his recent troubles had literally diminished him. "You have to understand. My family had expectations," he began, echoing the same excuse he'd offered 15 years ago. "And now your family has disappointments," Lauren countered, glancing briefly at a business journal someone had left on a nearby high-top table. Trevor's face prominently featured beneath the headline about Reynolds Holdings' collapse. Before Trevor could respond, Ethan and Noah approached, their matching navy blazers and confident strides drawing admiring glances from conference attendees. They moved with the natural ease of young men accustomed to sophisticated environments, entirely unaware of the seismic confrontation unfolding before them. "Mom, Dr. Thompson from MIT wants to discuss our research on biodegradable polymers," Ethan said, his enthusiasm for science momentarily overriding his awareness of the tense atmosphere. Lauren's transformation was immediate and remarkable. The glacial composure she'd maintained with Trevor melted into genuine warmth as she smiled at her sons. "That's wonderful, Ethan." She turned back to Trevor, her expression cooling again. "Trevor, these are Ethan and Noah Mitchell. Boys, this is an old acquaintance, Trevor Reynolds." The teenagers extended their hands politely, the impeccable manners Lauren had instilled in them automatically engaging. Trevor stared at their offered hands for a moment too long before shaking them mechanically. His eyes, identical in color to theirs, darted between their faces, desperately searching for himself in their features. "Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Reynolds," Noah said courteously, his analytical gaze assessing the older man with mild curiosity. "We read about your company," added Ethan with surprising gentleness. "Sorry about your recent setbacks." Trevor flinched again, realizing these boys, his sons, knew him only as a failed businessman. They had no idea they were speaking to their biological father, the man whose DNA had given them those distinctive eyes and sharp minds. thank you," he managed, his voice hoarse. It's an honor to meet you both. Your mother's accomplishments are remarkable." Lauren placed her hands protectively on her son's shoulders, the diamond of her engagement ring catching the light. "Ethan and Noah have just received full scholarships to Harvard. Ethan developed a method for extracting lithium from used batteries that we're patenting, and Noah created an AI algorithm that identifies reusable components with 99.8% accuracy." Each achievement she listed was another silent rebuke, another piece of evidence of what Trevor had discarded that snowy night in Manhattan. He stared at the brilliant young men, his biological sons, as the full weight of his loss crushed whatever remained of his composure. "That's extraordinary," he whispered, the word catching in his throat. "Now, if you'll excuse us," Lauren continued smoothly, "we have that meeting with the president in Washington tomorrow. We need to depart within the hour." As they turned to leave, Trevor stepped forward, desperation overriding his better judgment. Would it be possible to meet again? Perhaps dinner or—" "Our schedule is quite full," Lauren interrupted politely but firmly. "Perhaps another time." The twins glanced between their mother and this strangely affected stranger, picking up on undercurrents they couldn't fully understand. Noah's analytical mind was already making connections, his gaze lingering on Trevor's eyes identical to his own and his brother's. As Lauren guided her sons away, Trevor remained rooted in place, watching them navigate through the crowd of admirers. Executives who had previously ignored him now studied him with new interest, some whispering behind cupped hands as they connected the unmistakable visual evidence before them. "Isn't that Trevor Reynolds? And those boys? The resemblance is uncanny. Did you hear what she said about $5,000? Trevor sank into a nearby chair, the whispers growing around him like an incoming tide. His attempt to network, to salvage something from his crumbling career, had transformed into public humiliation. The woman he had once dismissed as temporary, as insufficient for his world, now commanded that world with ease, while he struggled to maintain even a foothold. Across the room, Lauren engaged seamlessly with industry leaders, her composure unshaken by the encounter. Only James, who had joined the twins after their symposium session, noticed the slight tension in her smile. He placed a supportive hand at the small of her back, leaning in to whisper something that made her genuine smile return. Trevor watched this interaction with a hollowness expanding in his chest. This stranger offered Lauren what he never had: respect, partnership, support, and the boys, his biological sons, clearly regarded this man with affection and respect. The remainder of the reception passed in a blur for Trevor. He attempted to approach potential investors as planned, but found conversations awkwardly terminated as rumors spread through the room. By the time the event concluded, he had secured no meetings, no contacts, no lifelines for his failing venture. In the privacy of the Mitchell family's suite later that evening, Lauren stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing at Chicago's glittering skyline. James joined her, offering a glass of wine. "You knew he would be here," he said gently. It wasn't a question. Lauren nodded, accepting the glass. "I saw his name on the attendee list last week. I didn't think he would recognize me after all these years." "But you recognized him immediately." A small, sad smile crossed her face. "Some people leave indelible marks on your life, for better or worse." "The boys noticed something," James observed carefully. "Noah was asking questions on the way back to the hotel." Lauren sighed, touching her forehead to the cool glass. "I've always known this day would come. I just thought I'd have more time to prepare them." In the adjacent room, the twins were uncharacteristically quiet as they prepared for bed. Their typical banter and scientific debates had been replaced by thoughtful silence. "You saw it too, right?" Noah finally whispered to his brother. Ethan nodded. His eyes, exactly like ours. "And Mom's reaction. She knew him, really knew him." "Do you think he's—" "Has to be. Statistically, The genetic probability of that eye color combined with the emotional dynamics we observed. English, Noah. We're not writing a research paper. He's our biological father, Noah stated plainly. And Mom never told us. The brothers fell silent again, processing this revelation with the same methodical approach they applied to scientific problems. She must have had a good reason, Ethan finally said, loyalty to their mother overriding his curiosity. Noah nodded slowly. $5,000. That's what she said he offered. To solve the problem. The implications of that phrase hung heavily between them. Their entire existence had once been classified as a problem by the man they'd just met. Meanwhile, Trevor sat alone in his hotel bar, nursing his third scotch as he scrolled through his phone. Articles about Mitchell Innovation appeared alongside photos of Lauren at various business events. He found himself searching for images of the twins, discovering their academic achievements detailed in education journals and science publications. His sons had published peer-reviewed research before they were teenagers. They had developed patentable technologies while still in middle school. They were already accepted to Harvard, the university that had once been his own proving ground. And they had accomplished all this without him, because of his rejection, not despite it. Trevor's phone buzzed with a news alert. Mitchell Innovation announces revolutionary battery recycling process. The accompanying photo showed Lauren with the twins, all three smiling proudly beside a complex piece of machinery. The caption identified Ethan Mitchell as the co-developer of the process. His son had created something that would change an industry, while Trevor had systematically destroyed the company his grandfather had built. As the bar's lights dimmed for last call, Trevor closed the articles and opened his email. With shaking fingers, he drafted a message to Lauren, then deleted it. Drafted another, deleted it again. What could he possibly say that would matter now? The truth was inescapable. His sons didn't need him. They never had. His rejection, meant to free him for greater things, had instead freed them to become extraordinary without the burden of his flawed influence. While guiding her sons away with her head held high, Lauren didn't know that before sunrise, her confrontation with Trevor would be headline news on every major business portal, forcing her to finally tell the twins the truth she had guarded for 14 years. Lauren guided her sons away from Trevor with her head held high, but her composed exterior masked the storm brewing inside. Years of carefully constructed narratives and protective half-truths were unraveling in a single evening. As she and the twins stepped into the elevator with James, she sensed the questions forming in their analytical minds, recognized the way Noah's eyes, so painfully like Trevor's, narrowed slightly as he processed the interaction they had just witnessed. The morning arrived with a harsh digital chime from Lauren's phone at precisely 5:30. She reached for it automatically, expecting the usual market reports and meeting reminders. Instead, a cascade of news alerts illuminated her screen, each more alarming than the last. Revealed, Billionaire tech CEO Lauren Mitchell was abandoned pregnant by Reynolds' heir. Twin prodigies unaware of biological father, Reynolds' scandal takes new dimension. From waitress to billionaire, how Lauren Mitchell built an empire after being rejected with $5,000. Lauren sat upright, suddenly wide awake. The Peninsula suite remained dark and quiet, James still asleep beside her, the twins in the adjacent room. But outside their temporary sanctuary, her carefully guarded personal history was exploding across digital headlines. She scanned the articles with growing dismay. The confrontation at the Peninsula reception had been witnessed by dozens of influential figures, and in the ruthlessly efficient ecosystem of business gossip, the full story had found its way to journalists within hours. Several articles quoted sources close to the event, describing Trevor's shock upon seeing the twins and Lauren's pointed reference to the $5,000. "James," she whispered, gently shaking her fiancé, "we have a situation." By 6:15, Lauren's crisis management team was on a video call, discussing damage control strategies while she paced the suite's living room in her robe. "The story is everywhere, Lauren," her communications director explained. "Major outlets are seeking comment. Several have already connected the twins' birth dates to your time at NYU and your employment at Cafe Manhattanite. They've established the timeline conclusively." "We need to get ahead of this," James advised, his academic's methodical mind already analyzing options. Lauren nodded, her decision crystallizing. "Cancel all morning appointments. The boys deserve to hear this from me, not from social media alerts or news reports." As if summoned by her words, the door to the twins' room opened and Noah emerged, his phone clutched in his hand, Ethan close behind. Their expressions, confused, hurt, questioning, broke Lauren's heart more effectively than Trevor ever had. "Mom," Noah said quietly, holding up his screen displaying one of the headlines. "What is this?" Lauren took a deep breath. "Sit down, both of you. It's time I told you everything." For the next hour, as dawn gradually illuminated the Chicago skyline outside their windows, Lauren finally shared the complete story. The whirlwind romance with Trevor Reynolds, his cruel rejection, the $5,000 check, her struggle as a pregnant waitress without support, and the decision that had shaped their family. "So he just threw us away?" Ethan asked, his voice uncharacteristically small. "He threw away the chance to know you," Lauren corrected gently. "And that has been his loss entirely. Look at the extraordinary young men you've become without his influence." Noah, always the more analytical twin, processed the information methodically. "Why tell us now? You've kept this secret for 14 years. "Because you deserve the truth before you encounter people who know this story. And because he's in your orbit now," Lauren admitted. "The technology world is smaller than it seems. With your achievements and his situation, paths could cross again." "Is that why you never dated until James?" Ethan asked suddenly. "Because of what he did?" Lauren exchanged a glance with James, who had remained a supportive, silent presence. "Partly, but mostly because you two were always my priority. Every decision I've made since that night has been about giving you the best possible life." As the twins absorbed this revelation, Lauren's phone buzzed relentlessly with calls from journalists, business associates, and eventually, a number she still recognized despite the passing years. Trevor. She declined the call, but moments later, a text appeared. "Please let me explain. This isn't how I wanted them to find out." Lauren showed the message to James, who raised an eyebrow. "How did he expect them to find out?" he asked quietly. "I don't think he ever did," she replied. Throughout that day, secluded in their suite, the family navigated this new reality together. The twins asked questions Lauren had anticipated for years, about Trevor's family, about whether they had grandparents they'd never met, about genetic health history. She answered everything honestly, no longer needing to navigate around the central truth of their origin. By evening, the initial shock had settled into contemplative silence. Noah had retreated into research mode, scouring online archives for information about Trevor and the Reynolds family. Ethan had processed his emotions more physically, disappearing into the hotel gym for hours before returning, exhausted but more centered. As Lauren prepared a statement for her PR team to release the following day, her phone buzzed again with Trevor's number. This time, against her better judgment, she answered. "I'm surprised you picked up," Trevor said, his voice hoarse. "Professionalism, Trevor. Something I learned on my own." A heavy pause filled the line before he spoke again. "Lauren, I need to see them again. I need to explain. They deserve to know who I am." "Who you are?" Her voice hardened. "A man who paid for his girlfriend to abort and disappear? Or an executive who defrauded investors and destroyed his own family's company? Which version do you want them to know?" The silence that followed was deafening. "I've changed," he finally murmured. "No, Trevor. You've failed. There's a fundamental difference. I have legal rights. You relinquished those rights 15 years ago," Lauren interrupted sharply. "But if you want to try legally, go ahead." My lawyers would love to publicly detail every aspect of our last meeting in 2008. They both knew it was an empty threat. Any paternity suit would be devastating to what remained of Trevor's reputation. Can I at least get to know them, as a family friend? I won't tell them who I am, just be part of their lives somehow. Lauren sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. Trevor, this isn't about you. It never was. Ethan and Noah have full lives, surrounded by admirable men who mentor and support them. They don't need a stranger entering their lives out of guilt or curiosity. What if they want to know me someday? When they turn 18, I'll tell them everything. If they want to meet you then, it will be their decision. Until then, keep your distance. 3 months later, Lauren received an email from her lawyer that made her pause in the middle of reviewing quarterly projections. Trevor had transferred 10% of his remaining shares in Reynolds Holdings to a trust fund in Ethan and Noah's names, accessible when they turned 25. There was no personal message, only the legal documentation. Lauren studied the documents carefully, noting that the shares, while diminished in value from Reynolds Holdings' glory days, still represented several $million. After a moment's reflection, she forwarded the files to her legal department with a single instruction. Verify legality, but don't accept. Create an equivalent fund with Mitchell shares in his name for donation to the Foundation for Technological Education for Underprivileged Youth. 6 years passed with remarkable speed. The twins flourished at Harvard, their academic brilliance matched by growing emotional intelligence. Lauren and James had married in a private ceremony where Ethan and Noah had served as best men. Mitchell Innovation had expanded globally, its technologies revolutionizing electronic waste processing across continents. On a crisp autumn day during their sophomore year, Ethan and Noah sat in Lauren's Boston office, listening as she explained that Trevor Reynolds was in the final stages of pancreatic cancer. "Why are you telling us this now?" Noah asked, always the more analytical of the pair. "Because you deserve the truth before you enter a world where people certainly know this story. And because he's ill. Terminal cancer." The twins processed this information in silence. "Do you hate him?" Ethan finally asked, studying his mother's expression. Lauren shook her head. "No, a long time ago perhaps. But then I realized his rejection was the catalyst that forced me to become everything I am. More importantly, it gave me you two. How could I hate someone who, even unintentionally, gave me the greatest joys of my life?" "Should we see him?" Noah questioned, uncertain for one of the few times in his methodical life. "That's a decision only you can make. I'll support whatever you choose." 2 days later, Trevor Reynolds, gaunt and pale in his hospital bed, received unexpected visitors. The twins entered alone, without Lauren, their expressions unreadable as they approached. "We didn't come as your sons," Ethan clarified immediately. "We just thought we should meet you once." "I understand," Trevor murmured, tears filling his eyes. "It's more than I deserve." For an hour they conversed formally. The young men shared details about their studies, their aspirations. Trevor listened, occasionally offering an observation or piece of advice, drinking in the presence of these extraordinary young men who carried his genes but not his influence. When they rose to leave, Trevor gathered courage to ask the question burning in his heart. "Your mother, is she happy?" Noah smiled for the first time. "Completely. She married Dr. James Chen 5 years ago. He's been like a father to us since we were 10. Trevor nodded, a mixture of pain and relief crossing his gaunt features. "She deserves every happiness." As the young men departed, Noah paused at the door. "Mr. Reynolds, I asked my mother if she regretted anything. Do you know what she said? That she's grateful you were exactly who you were that night. Because if you had been better, perhaps she would have accepted less from life." When the door closed, Trevor Reynolds finally understood the true magnitude of what he had lost. Not just a family, but the chance to be part of something extraordinary. In her Boston apartment, Lauren watched the city lights, waiting for her son's return. James placed his hands gently on her shoulders. "Will they be all right?" Lauren smiled. "They always are. We built that together, didn't we?" As Boston's lights twinkled below, Lauren Mitchell reflected on the long journey from that snowy night in Manhattan. The pain had transformed into purpose, rejection into motivation, and $5,000 into a billion-dollar empire. More importantly, she had transformed abandonment into a complete family, built on love and respect, not obligation or guilt. The true justice wasn't in Trevor's downfall, but in the extraordinary life she had built despite him, and ironically, because of him. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen